Chris commented Google under this, but look at this, 50-50 Apple, Tesla. So people are kind of split on this.
Well, Apple, look, you kind of know, look, Apple has said they're betting the whole company on the Vision Pro. That's the next big product. You can argue that they might do a car, but who's even talking about a car anymore? So it's the Vision Pro. With Tesla, Cybertruck's about to come out. We know we're going to have the compact car. They're talking about the bot, FSD. I mean, there's just a whole, Jesse Dow had a great list of like just next year catalysts that we already know. Energy, I mean, energy is growing like gangbusters. So when you ask yourself, can Tesla get to 3T before Apple can get to, 4T? Probably. I would agree with that.
Vitaly, what would you pick? To Apple or Tesla next 5 years?
I'll be right back. I got to take this call.
Gotcha. Oh, I'm sorry, I was muted, but I mean, come on. What kind of question is that?
You think it's Tesla?
Of course it's Tesla. This is ridiculous. Like, Apple is, I mean, even Chris, I think Chris sent Google versus Apple. He sent in our private chat, and you should just share it here. I don't know if you have it here, but just show the two screens, Chris.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
Google is completely undervalued. And even if you said Apple is fairly valued in some world, fine. But then Google's completely undervalued, and people should be buying that. And Tesla is nowhere near what we think is going to happen with it. So I think Apple's already there, what we think is going to happen with Apple. I'm not saying they don't have any future growth. I'm just saying they're basically there. And even if they compound at a small percentage, like Carlos said, if people have been shares for 10 years, you've got your splits, you got your dividends coming in. I see why they're not selling Apple. I understand it because they've made a lot of money and they're still getting dividend payments and they've got the splits going. So I get that. But for new investors, I would say Google is where you should probably look, or Tesla, of course.
So last quarter, Apple did about 81 billion in revenue, 19 billion net income. The profit margin is about 24%. Operating income is 23 billion. Now, there is a caveat to this that Apple has a little lumpiness. That December quarter is usually like about 20% higher. So, when you see this, it's like, oh my God, like what's going on with Apple? Because year over year, they're actually not, they're pretty flat and their operating income is really flat. But then when you look at like it's, competitor Google, this is Google's last quarter. They did 74 billion in revenue. Net income is up 14%. Operating income is up 12% to almost 21. And if you look at the valuation of Apple, it's much, much higher than what Google is. So from an operating metric side,
Chris, can you do side by side? Because it's clearer when you actually see both side by side as opposed to one at a time. Is that possible? Can you take a screen grab of both on your thing and just do that screen grab share?
Let me see if I can do that.
Because it becomes evident when you actually look at it as opposed to go through one item at a time,
If not, Chris, just send it to me and I'll do it on Canva real quick and I'll get it set up.
And then he can do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So just send in the private chat.
But yeah, Apple, if you have Apple, first of all, you shouldn't be getting rid of Apple. I'm not saying that at all. So people who have Apple and have all three, that's great. But once again, if you're just coming in right now and you're looking at what's undervalued and what's a good play, I mean, to me, it's obvious. Like Google is definitely one of those plays. Amazon is one of those plays. Apple's still going to appreciate, but I'm just thinking that Google and Amazon have way more to go if you're just picking it right now.
But you think that by market cap, like so Google's at or Apple's at 3 trillion, let's call it that. Let's say by 2028 they're at 4 trillion, very modest, 3 to 4. You think Tesla can go from 700 billion to 5 trillion or above 4 trillion by 2028? So there are 4.
Yeah, I mean, I know you're saying 2028, but I don't invest that way. I don't invest like, in 5 years, if they're not at 4 trillion, I'm out. It's more like, are they executing on exactly the fundamentals that we keep talking about? So if they're at 2 trillion and they're not at 4, but I see they're still growing and the robo-taxis are real and they're coming out. If you see that happening, then yes, I think the trajectory is still past Apple. It might not happen in 2028. It might happen in 2030. I don't know about that, but to me, it's obvious it's going to happen.
Interesting. Yeah, I said Tesla. I got a lot of comments by people that were super Tesla, and then a lot of people were like, "How can you possibly say it's Tesla?" Like,
I know it's kind of crazy.
Very split on that one.
Do you know why? And this is a weird thing. When there's a winner, when there's a clear winner, and Apple's a clear winner, of course. So they always expect the winner to always win. And I'm not saying that the winner doesn't always win. Like Google is a winner, Apple's a winner, but they just think the same thing is going to keep happening exactly the way it used to happen. And with technology, things change pretty fast.
Yeah.
Especially if Google is more advanced in AI and they're doing more research in that respect. And they obviously are. I don't even know if this is a contradictory thing I'm saying, or like they obviously are doing it, and this is becoming more important. It seems like Google can outpace Apple in terms of growth over the next 5 years. That's what it seems like. But once again, do you get rid of Apple? I'm not saying that at all. You should keep the good stocks you have. They're all great companies.
Yeah. So let me just minimize. I should move this over. So, you guys can see the screen, right?
Yeah.
So on the left hand, right now we're looking at Alphabet. Alphabet's growing about 70, at 74 billion. They're still growing, and their cloud division is doing gangbusters right now. Cloud and this one other division is just growing double digits, like 24, 25%. Apple has kind of just slowed down. Now, Apple does have that their December quarter usually outpaces a lot compared to Google, of course, where Google is a lot more linear growth. But if you look at Apple's figures, look at this year over year, they're down a lot. Like they're down 5% year over year in 2022. Their net income was down. So these are not healthy growth metrics, or at least for what's it called? Google, the metrics are actually getting somewhat better. This right here can be attributed to a lot of like additional spending that Google did, which they're cost rationalizing and laying off staff. And so you can see here a market improvement. So they went from, let's say right here in September, 13.9 billion to 13.62. And then they changed up, they let go a lot of people. Their profit margin was 18% to now going back to 21%. And then June to almost 25% profit margins again. Whereas Apple, you haven't seen that improvement, nearly as much as Google has, right?
Here's a question. Can I ask you a question
Yeah.
Because Apple, I think everybody's assuming, the people who are still betting on them, that their services are growing at a certain pace. Do you have that? Are you comparing their services and how fast they're growing?
Well, services only grew 8% year over year, I think. So even if they're betting on services, that's
year over year, not a quarter over quarter thing. A year over year.
Let me check to make sure. I'm not fully sure.
Yeah.
I haven't been tracking Apple for a while since I sold out recently for Enphase. So there you go. I did not sell my Google, by the way.
Yeah, it's 8% year over year. 8%. Yep.
I mean,
8%. 5.5% quarter over quarter. So 8% year over year.
Did KRIS just exit himself?
Yeah, KRIS must have done that. What do you think about this question? He'll probably be back in a second. With better management, Google could have been at $3 trillion. Do you agree with that?
You know what? There is a part of me, but I think every company went crazy hiring, and Meta was a problem. Amazon had the same issue. Apple didn't have that issue. They were always steadily buying back their stock. Financial engineering, which some people like, some people don't. I actually like it. So I think they're better at managing their business. Apple's just better. And now Google is maybe becoming more lean and becoming better at managing their business. So yeah, I do agree with that kind of.
KRIS, do you agree with this comment? Google could have been.
Yeah, well, you know what? Yes and no. I will say yes, because Google has made a lot of side bets. Like over the last 20 years, they've invested in all sorts of cockamamie things. But, that's what you're supposed to do as a growth company. You're supposed to invest in all sorts of things that could one day become a real big moneymaker. Like look at Waymo. Waymo's been losing money for them for the last 10 years. But, self-driving cars are going to be a thing eventually. Verily, same thing. So a lot of what Google does seem to be a lot of like side bets, but their side bets are also a reason why they've, been able to grow exponentially, especially when it comes to AI. And it's the same thing with like Facebook, and Meta. I keep calling Facebook Meta, man. It's never going to go away. But basically everyone thought, oh, the metaverse is a joke. No one wants the metaverse, blah, blah. But a lot of those coexisting technologies from the metaverse are what saved the day for Meta, because when Apple came down hard with this whole nonsense, with the whole restricting targeted advertising, it was the AI portion of all those investments that Meta had done to actually get past all that stuff and ended up becoming a moat. So I'd say the same thing about Google too, where I think a lot of times Google side bets definitely are something that drag down their profitability, but they also are the next generation growth drivers as well. Now, there is something to be said about management hiring people that have been, let's just say, more activist than actually doing the work. And I think Google realized that after a certain period of time, and now they're starting to push all those people out and keeping the people that are, like really good, and basically carrying things forward. Like one of the best hires, I think, in my opinion, that they made over the course of like the last 5 years was Curry and Thomas, who's leading their Google Cloud division right now. Dude, if you saw Google Cloud Next, it was like
I saw
it
parts
was
of
just
it. Yeah.
it was crazy the amount of things that they came up with, right, in such a very short period of time. So I'd say Google definitely has moments where they lose focus, but they're big enough of a company where they'll gain the focus back. You know?
So I want to add to this, and so if you think, and Chamath actually had a great point. If you learned, I forgot what All in Pod he said this, but Google from 2000 to 2010 was super innovative with Android, with Chrome, all of these projects that were happening that made Gmail, everything that we use now, YouTube, whenever that purchase was. So all of these things that they did to grow their business. Then from 2010 to 2020 now, they were coasting. You know what I'm saying? They weren't actively creating new things. I know they had these side bets, but they weren't in the same sort of level of creating new stuff because they're making so much fucking money in the last decade. And so what happens now that, and I'm glad ChatGPT came out because they used Google technology, which they ignored in 2017 because Google itself ignored their own engineers. All those engineers are now gone. They're all in different companies doing their startups because they ignored those people. And now ChatGPT is out, lit a fire under their ass, and now they have to innovate again. So I think we're in the second coming of Google beginning that wave of innovation. And if you see just from their talk, they just had one, and I think ticker symbol U did a super cut of the whole event of the Google, whatever it's called. People should watch it because Google is back, I feel, to innovating again and caring about creating new technologies, bringing new things to people. And they didn't do that for 10 years, in my opinion.
Yeah. That's fair.